Hi, everyone. My name is Katie McKnight. I am a cancer survivor and also a board member of Bay Area Young Survivors, which is a nonprofit that supports people diagnosed under age 45 with breast cancer living in or being treated in the Bay Area. So I'm coming here today to tell you about my experience going through fertility preservation twice, once ahead of cancer treatment and once after all of my treatment a year later. Which both I got covered through SB 600, which I'm so grateful for. But man, was it difficult to make it happen. So I'm going to walk you through just the first cycle that I got covered and what that was like. So in 2020, I quickly went from being a newly happy married person to getting diagnosed with triple negative breast cancer at age 30. And I had to put my life on hold while I went through treatment. And at the time, I didn't realize I'd be among the first cohort of patients to utilize SB 600 for fertility preservation. So my diagnosis was hands down the most stressful time of my life, and you probably can't fully appreciate that statement unless you've been through cancer treatment yourself. And so I found in the research that if I started treatment within about 3 weeks after diagnosis, I'd have a better outcome. So I was like ready to go. I wanted to get in there as quickly as possible. But I faced a lot of questions, and it seemed like these seemingly endless decisions that I had to make. What care team should I move forward with to put my life into their hands? Should I amputate one or both breasts? Should I push for advanced screening to make sure I'm not metastatic? Just so many things that I had to grapple with. And while some health insurance providers have a streamlined process to get patients started on fertility preservation really quickly, others delay and deny. And unfortunately, my experience at Kaiser Oakland was the latter. And I had to very quickly go on the defensive to get it covered, especially in a really timely fashion. So I was told that I needed to get surgery first before I could be scheduled with an oncologist, before I could talk about fertility preservation. And so I went out and got second opinions at 3 different places, and they all said something totally different. They said, no, you need chemo first, then you need to do surgery, then maybe more chemo. So go ahead and get started on fertility preservation. So I went back to my provider, and it just felt like this delay tactic, or maybe just an outdated protocol. But then after pushing in a lot of self-advocacy, I was matched with a fertility preservation office through Kaiser down in Fremont, California, which ends up being a 2 to 4 hour round trip commute in the horrific Bay Area traffic. So they wouldn't schedule me to start fertility preservation until I got a note from the oncologist, which in their eyes, I had to get surgery first, but I was not doing. So basically what I had to do was drive down to Fremont, beg the secretary working there to let me see the doctor, and beg the doctor to let me start. And miraculously, that worked. I still can't believe that it did. But as I got started and did more research, I realized that the best path for me was to freeze embryos, because I have a partner, we're in this together, and I have the BRCA mutation, and I wanted to screen for that. And so I knew there was a little statistically better odd because I knew I was going to biopsy those embryos. But I was told that I could only freeze eggs, and SB 600 doesn't apply to embryos, which I've heard is not usually the case. So that's where, this deny tactic came up. So then I started navigating the appeals process. And the first critical step to that was really coming across someone who knew how to do that. And that was Joyce Reinecke from the Alliance of Fertility Preservation. And if I had not met Joyce through my coworker at the time who went through breast cancer in her 30s, I would have never known about this avenue, period. So then I had to file a grievance with Kaiser, which Joyce explained to me that I could also simultaneously file one with DMHC, that I didn't have to wait for their denial. And so that's what I did. I wrote a detailed letter. I received the denial from Kaiser. They told me about their denial. I had a phone call with lawyers from DMHC who requested more information on my case. I did more research and a second appeals letter with the supplemental information and I also got my mother-in-law, who's a lawyer, to add a legal argument in there, which really got their attention. But there were so many phone calls, so many emails. And then all the while, Kaiser was pressuring me to pay in full over $16,000, I think, for like the embryo piece. And it was very overwhelming. And I just kept telling them, I need to wait until the independent medical review, because that's what I'm entitled to. I'm not paying a dime, but you need to see me. And they did that, which to their credit, I'm glad that they let it play out. And then at the end of this process, before the decision came down, because everything was so time sensitive, I had to make peace with the uncertainty that if the independent medical review didn't go in my favor, I was liable for all that cost, which felt very uncertain. So I had my egg retrieval. Oh, and all of these steps happened while I was doing daily injections for the IVF process, doing that 3 to 4 hour commute to get transvaginal ultrasounds and meds, and numerous other next steps with cancer treatment. So if you can imagine, it was very chaotic. So the result was just total exhaustion. I luckily had 27 eggs. It was a very successful retrieval. And that resulted in one BRCA-free embryo because there's such a high attrition rate if you're testing and looking at chromosomally normal embryos, et cetera. And luckily, all of that work ended in the Department of Managed Healthcare overturning the decision of my health plan. And that's what this decision looked like. And it was in the public record. So that felt like a huge win. And yes, was very motivating. But, stepping back and thinking about this, there's just too much burden on the patient, and that really needs to change. Out of a dozen or so cancer patients that I've counseled who have come to Bays in the beginning stages of their diagnosis, and I've told them exactly what Joyce told me, and then I gave them my templates and all of the best insider info I had, only one went through the process because it was just so overwhelming. So, creating clearer criteria of who qualifies so they know that if they have a fighting chance before they start the process, making it easier to get help if you call. So there's knowledgeable people telling you about the process, automatically sorting those requests. If it says cancer, we can harness AI. We can make it urgent, don't leave it up to a little line in the letter. Also, don't rely on patients to come up with letters of support from their doctors, because at Kaiser specifically, they aren't always comfortable going against their health plan. And educate healthcare providers so we get the information as patients, and require institutional change after an overturn of a denial happens, because I don't think there's a lot of accountability afterwards. So to end on my policy recommendation and research recommendation, I also see a lot of breast cancer patients who have a treatment plan that doesn't require toxic medication, but indirectly puts them in menopause after their treatment. And that should really be looked at, especially those who need tamoxifen. And also evaluating whether fertility preservation following surgery impacts the outcome of an FP cycle compared to before, since a lot of people are told they need to do surgery first. So thank you so much.